Before I do get started, let's just quickly have a little recap of my little trigger warning. Warning. Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. The characters and events depicted in this story are fictitious. Any similarity to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. And now, let's go ahead and dive right back in to the story. Chapter 3, The Angry Uprising, Day 4. Andrea, you're not well. Your father and I are very worried about you. We just want to get you the care you need. It's for the best. We love you. You love me? But you aren't listening to me. Why aren't you listening to me? Why isn't anyone listening to me? Oh, honey, you're confused is all. You don't know what's real anymore. That's why we're taking you where you can get help. But I don't want to go. I'm not the one that's sick. Why are you doing this to me? Tears, anger, my mother's face, blurred by my tears. Were they my tears? I wiped my face, wetness. My left arm, blood everywhere. My mother's face again. Concern, but not for me. Fear, but not for me. Oh, Andrea. I understand that you're scared. We're protecting you. That's why we're going to get you help, honey. I mean, just look at what you've done to yourself. She looked down towards my arm as blood splattered to the tiles. The look on her face was one of disappointment. She really didn't understand that she was acting like a Stepford wife. You know what happened, Mother, and you're not listening anymore. You're supposed to protect me. Sobbing, breath catching in my throat, I choked out, I hate you! It was my voice, detached, so full of anguish, despair, misery, and hatred. The heartbreak was visceral, palpable. I could feel every cell giving into some kind of wish to die. What level of hell was this? My mother's face turned away, now only the back of her head. Curls, blonde, gray-streaked. My hand reached out to grab her, pull her backwards, jerk that hair off her scalp. Someone else reached for me. No! I shot straight up in the chair, awoken by my own scream. I had to catch my breath. It felt like I'd run a marathon. There was a puddle of drool on the desk that was oozing into and ruining part of one of my yearbooks. I was still dressed, still sitting at the desk. I smoothed my hair back and assessed my surroundings. Sunbeams divided the room into slices. Birds chirped outside the window. The morning had come. I rubbed my eyes hard as though it would scrub the last image out of my head. What a f***ed up dream, I mused as I ran a hand through my hair. You know it wasn't a dream. You have to start trusting yourself. That was a memory. I didn't want to accept that. No, I wouldn't. But then again, it was way too vivid. My eyes flickered over to the folder. It looked different somehow in the harsh light of day, especially the photos. The photos of me taken at various angles. There were marks everywhere. What did these people think I had done to myself? How could they have possibly thought I was even capable of doing many of these things to myself? I looked like something out of a horror movie. I looked closer. There were welts, raised and angry, all across my backside. What had I done to earn that? And how did they think that I did that to myself? What did they actually think? It was as though there was no reason for concern for those marks on me. The most disturbing aspect of this was the bruising on the neck and collarbone. Someone had been very angry at me. But who? And why was no one concerned with these marks either? They seemed to bypass much mention in the files. Kind of absently then, I looked at my left arm and noticed the faintest outline of scars. They were so faded and pale that I had to squint to see them, but they were there, ghosts of the image I'd seen in that vision. The tension crept in between my eyes and something burned in the base of my skull. Only that wasn't exactly the source of the pain. It was deeper. I focused on it, and as soon as I did, I swore I heard a zzz sound, like an appliance shorting out. Next thing I knew, I was standing in the kitchen, a glass of water in hand. I didn't know what I was doing. There was an open bottle of pills in my other hand. I looked at the label. I couldn't really read it, but I saw the may cause drowsiness label. Something about it was all wrong. Then I heard a voice.
Andrea, dear, take your pill and come join us for dinner.
What was going on? I looked down and noticed there was no cast on my left arm. Instead, there were newly healed cuts. I sat the water down carefully on the counter. I reached up and ran a hand through my hair and nearly screamed when I felt the shaved head, the jagged haircut. Oh my God. I almost threw the pills.
Andi, we're waiting. Is there a problem?
A man's voice. My pulse quickened hearing this. My legs shook. I took slow, cautious steps into the dining room. My heart dropped to my gut as I saw them, my mother and father, sitting at the dining table. I wanted to run away. I quickly darted back out of the room, out of view, before they noticed me. I was back in the kitchen, hovering over the sink, practically hyperventilating and dry heaving. Before I could get my bearings, I was in darkness. There was someone there with me. I heard the sound of a belt slipping through denim loops. I heard a zipper.
Andrea, you were a very bad girl.
Whiskey-soaked whispers in the dark. I stopped breathing. I searched my mind for a way out. I didn't know where I was or what was happening, but I was terrified. Hands found me in the darkness. They were ripping at clothing, pulling my hands above my head. I heard the whoosh of an object cutting through the air. Before I could scream, I found myself back in my old room, still sitting at the desk. My hands clenched in fists, my nails digging into the soft of my palms, bile rising to the top of my throat. I shuddered and tried to shake it off. I still didn't know what was going on. You're starting to remember. You're not crazy. The voice seemed familiar, but I decided it was my own voice. I blinked at the sun coming in through the blinds. I felt weird. Not the same weird that I'd always remembered feeling. Not the haze of medication, the numbness of booze. It felt like some part of me was clawing to the surface, regaining some kind of control. I went back downstairs after grabbing the file and the photos off the desk and taking them with me to the kitchen. I sat them on the bar as I poured some juice. I grabbed some fruit and sat down, flipping the file open. I took a deep breath and scanned the pages. I couldn't believe everything I was reading and all the images of me. This frail yet formidable-looking thing with an emotionless gaze. A zombie. I read some more notes in the file. After I had been admitted, the files referred to me directly by my name, doing away with the alphanumeric coding system altogether. That seemed a little odd, but I ignored it. Session 14, 8 a.m. Andrea has new cuts on the interior left calf, have sent aides to quarters to find the implement. Andrea is still unable to attend the group. Others are uncomfortable and do not participate when she is near. Andrea is listless this morning, does not want to communicate, has not said a word. Andrea has refused breakfast again. Will monitor for a feeding tube. Weight loss is still a concern. It went on, more of the same kind of thing. I was frequently referred to as being uncooperative or uncommunicative. So many references to my unwillingness to participate. I shut the folder and quickly dismissed any disturbing thoughts. After all, those thoughts weren't mine. They belonged to that poor thing in those photos. She was obviously extremely disturbed, going through some kind of hell that I didn't know or outgrew. I needed help. I was glad I had gotten it. How else would I have made it this far in life? I mean, There's no denying that I'd had issues with little things here and there and had to take some pills for this or that, but that was all normal nowadays, right? So many ads on TV for anxiety, insomnia, depression, adding this thing to enrich this part of your lacking life. We had become socially immune to disorders. That's all this was. Some part of my mind grasped for assurance that the other part of my mind couldn't give. There was a part of me that lacked the conviction to fully embrace that I had what? Actually lied to such a degree? What purpose would that have served? But I just couldn't accept it, even if the proof was right in front of my face. The wounds in the pictures, they weren't by your own hands, Andi. I went to grab my pain meds. To hell with staying straight for this train wreck. I still had a million things to do. The funeral services were quickly approaching, and there was still so much to pack up, banks to visit, and bills to deal with. I had to get my ass in gear. This stuff was not doing me any good to go through or focus on now. I really needed to get out of this house. I got dressed somehow after shuffling to the living room with a glass of orange juice to swallow number 14 and half of number 13. Courage, Andi, my own shaky voice as I grabbed the keys to the Cavalier. I had to make sure I wasn't forgetting anything 3 times. This is so annoying. Why can't I just do things? Fuck. I was getting more and more frustrated and nearly didn't go. Then I remembered how much I had to do, how bad things in this house were creeping me out, how my meds were gone. Thanks, rang out sarcastically in my head at the thought, and how I did not want to get by all clean and sober. 12 and 1/2 painkillers left for someone that is basically immune to their effect. Awesome. My voice answered me without delay. Suck it up, Buttercup. There's no other way to get this done. I was gritting my teeth as I sat in the driver's seat. I checked the seatbelt, the mirrors, and adjusted the seat like a dozen times. When I was at least moderately satisfied that it was all good, I checked the gear shift to make sure I was in park, then turned the ignition. I nearly reversed into the garage door when the sensors kicked in and opened it for me. Thanks for small favors, Dad. It was a smart piece of technology. The drive was laughable and piteous. I drove about 10 miles per hour the entire way, scared of running over an animal or hitting a bump or pothole too fast. By the time I got to the market, I had earned 3 dozen middle fingers and a smorgasbord of obscenities from angered motorists that had to wait for several miles to pass me. The sun had decided to show itself too. Late August and muggy, 94 degrees today. Great time to discover that the AC wasn't working. The sun was beaming into the car as if on a mission to destroy me, like a vampire hunter chasing their mark. Vampire was pretty appropriate. I was wearing all black as usual, a tight miniskirt, tall lace-up boots, thigh-high socks, and a hoodie. I was boiling alive. Who dressed me? It was really quite a miracle I had been able to get these things on with the cast and all. I didn't care, but it was too hot. I couldn't take the hoodie off because I didn't have a shirt on. It was hard enough to zip the hoodie up. I didn't need the drama of a shirt as well. Not today, Satan. I chuckled to myself. I arrived in town sweaty and pissed off. The painkillers in my system allowed a small respite. I had consoled myself with the other half of number 13 on the way there, since what should take 25 minutes had taken me over an hour. It felt warranted. The market was overflowing with teenage boys and girls on their way to the lake about 10 miles east, since tonight was a Friday night. I wondered for a moment how many of my childhood friends had been conceived at that lake. They were picking up several 6-packs of soda and greasy snack food and getting older kids to buy beer. Pardon me, I mumbled as I tried to walk past a group of several kids, some girls that were trying too hard to be aloof and some boys that reeked of weed. They were eating hot dogs and not moving. The smell of them and their general lack of manners nearly made me dry heave. Really, pardon me, I need to get by. I chirped again, pushing my way past them towards the side where all the liquor was kept. One of them made some snide comment about Halloween, which I ignored. I was the adult here after all. Adults get to buy booze anytime they want. I win. As I was perusing the selection of vodka, I saw two older couples, and by older, I mean they were probably in their 20s, surely there to provide alcohol, joining the younger group. I heard one of them say something, casting whispers and glances my way, keeping their voices and their eyes down. I couldn't quite hear it at first, but it got repeated, possibly for my benefit, a little louder. "She's a nasty witch. Did you hear that she seduced her own father? Witches do that kind of thing all the time. It's some kind of devil black magic if you get by your own daddy." A girl standing there, twiddling her bright platinum hair, chimed in. "Did you also know she has a demon lover? I heard that's why she her pops. That's what my brother told me after he'd been in her house. He said she sold her soul to the devil so the demon would love her." There was a bottle of vodka trembling in my good hand, about to slip and go crashing to the concrete floor beneath me. I kept telling myself that it was just stupid gossip, just something dumbass kids in small towns did. It meant nothing. And what were they even talking about? I didn't want to show that I was at all affected by this chatter and give them the satisfaction that they clearly wanted. I had to pull it together and march my witch ass to the register to purchase vodka because, goddammit, that's what I get to do, you little trolls. I sucked in a nice deep breath of cool air, thanks to the AC blasting in the section I was standing in, then righted my head. Fuck them, I thought, straightening my back and luxuriating in the coolness for a moment, allowing the sweat to dissipate, feeling the slight prickle of goosebumps riddling my skin. I had a thought at that moment. I felt that I'd been running hot my entire life. I just wanted to cool down. I loved sleeping with the AC blasting in my face. I even slept with a window open in the winter. I loved the chill of a swim in a frigid pool or river or even the ocean. I shot a look over to the entranceway where my fan club was still loitering. Two more had joined them. One whispered female voice made its way to my ears. "I heard that she asked the demon to kill Kevin and Randy, and that she sacrificed her incest baby to the devil to seal the deal. You guys know that she was locked up at Elmhurst for a while, right? My mom was a nurse there back then. I heard some pretty fucked up shit. Lizbeth's best friend was in group with her. Everyone was scared of her." A small brunette leaned in. "Yeah, I heard that she'd cut herself and draw all over the walls with her blood. I heard she even used to drink it. Ew! Guys, I think she's looking at us." The smallest of the group alerted the rest. A tall, leggy, platinum blonde folded her skin-kissed arms across her chest as she pivoted on her wicker-wedged heel to face my direction. "So?" she sneered, playing it up for one of the guys she'd been eyeballing. "What the f*** is she gonna do? Stare me to death?" The group burst out in laughter. I hate this town. I bit my lip to prevent saying anything back. The pretty blonde smirked and turned back the other direction, flicking the flaxen, shimmering tresses with one hand behind her for effect. "See? I think it's all bullshit. She's not scary." The small brunette pursed her lips and held back a nervous chuckle. She was still watching me. It wasn't that the blonde had turned her back on me that did it. It wasn't even their weak attempt to get a rise out of me. I didn't know what it was, but something snapped. I didn't want to let these spoiled little children get the better of me because I was not even in their league. Their comments made me feel as though my entire life had been lived in a bubble all of a sudden. I was not this successful, respected writer. I was just that awkward girl that I hadn't been in so long that I'd forgotten she ever existed. The images of me from the file flashed in my mind. That poor girl, all those bruises and welts. These kids had no idea. They were all vitriol and bullshit, weaning the rich teats of their Beverly Hills wannabe moms. They knew nothing of pain, suffering, and anguish. I did. I have these scars, these waking nightmares, and a very expensive therapist for a reason. My boots took my legs hostage, and before I knew it, I had sauntered, with purpose, until I was standing just a few feet behind those kids. The vodka swished in my hands as I walked, reminding me that I was carrying a weapon. I didn't really think I had any intention of acting on the urge, but damn if the thought wasn't tempting. The mouthy blonde had her back turned on me. It would have been too easy. I paused before taking another step forward, not sure what I was going to do or say when a long, dark shadow stepped in front of me. Tight black jeans stretched across muscular legs blocked my view as a powerful scent assaulted my nostrils, triggering some reaction in my body that was unexpected. As if on cue, metal tips of black cowboy boots caught the sun at just the right time, the reflection of bright sunlight forcing my eyes upwards. Andrea? The slightly southern drawl in his voice was obvious immediately. I was still heated. I looked up through my eyelashes at whoever this was. Who the f*** wants to know? I was staring up into piercing blue eyes. His blonde hair was hanging half over one of them. It was so light, it was almost transparent in the sunlight. He smiled into my scowling face. Well, I'll be. It is you. Damn, girl, it's been a long time. You look fantastic. Before I could protest, he was leaning in to hug me. I didn't look fantastic. I looked like a sweaty train wreck with a broken arm. I awkwardly returned the embrace as best I could with a cast on one arm and a bottle of vodka in the other hand. He was still smiling at me when he pulled back, his eyes twinkling. I didn't say anything because my body was still processing all of these sensations and I couldn't quite place his face. It's Brahm. Please tell me you haven't forgotten. Brahm? Seriously? F***ing Brahm? Who names their kid Brahm? My mind was frantically trying to connect this face to a name and a memory. I stared at him blankly for what felt like an eternity, but in actuality it was only a few seconds. My brain then unscrambled itself. Oh God, Brahm Whitestone, Lucy's older brother. We had only known each other in passing from when he had briefly dated Mel. It wasn't serious and only lasted like a month. I hadn't thought about him in ages. The last thing I knew of him, he'd made a career out of making soundtracks for films or video games, maybe both. I didn't really know. Whatever the case, it kept him kind of obscure, able to have a relatively normal existence. I'd somehow managed to do the same. It dawned on me at that moment how similar our paths were. Time must have changed him quite a bit. I didn't recall him looking quite like this. Of course. I thought you'd moved to New York or Chicago or something. What are you doing here? My voice made a noise I didn't know it could make. Who was I right now? Yeah, New York, about 7 years ago. I came back for the big Whitestone family reunion, planning on just riding through to the Halloween ball, take a little sabbatical from the city life. His grin was infectious, like a magic spell pulling me into a calm I hadn't felt in a long time. I forgot what I was doing for a second. He blinked at me, those blue eyes like tractor beams. But anyway, what about you? What are you doing here? I thought you were in Los Angeles. Yeah, well, my parents kinda died. The kids behind Brahm had scattered and I hadn't even noticed. Damn those devil blue eyes of his. Oh, damn it, Andi, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm a real D-bag sometimes. That was stupid of me. He reached up and grabbed my shoulder and gave it a reassuring squeeze with one of those man mitts of his. It made me feel a little swoony. That and possibly the heat still lingering since I had on this damn hoodie. Really, Brahm, it's no big deal. I don't want to talk about it anyway. His eyes flicked towards my cast. You won't tell me I should see the other guy? He grinned at his own attempt at humor. Oh yeah, I really gave that cabinet what for? I sounded utterly moronic to myself, but I just smiled and wondered why he seemed to be trying to charm me. Maybe that was just his nature, judging by his mannerisms and the way he was put together. Not at all like me, a badly dressed extra in a cheesy 80s vampire film. I thought Luce said you dropped a box on it. His brows furrowed slightly and one of those translucent hairs seemed hell-bent on going directly into his eye. He shook his head and it moved, but only for a moment before it was right back to annoy him. He continued to play it cool, but I could tell it was bugging him. That's what I decided to focus on instead of his attractiveness. I mean, I'm numb. I'm not blind. Of course I did. Silly me. Shit. That's what I meant. That box had it coming. I play-slugged him with my left fist like a giant idiot. It immediately sent a shock of pain into my arm. I just blushed and smiled up at him. Ugh, who was I? I was flirting. Ew. I wasn't even sure why I was flirting. The sting of what I'd just been through with Adam still lingered all over me like a stain, for one thing. Secondly, all that information that I'd just learned about this presence. And to top that off with what I'd learned about my past, I really didn't know what I was doing. I just couldn't seem to help it. His smile widened at the contact of my play punch. He peered down at the bottle in my hand. You got plans right now? He was making a somewhat concerned and potentially wounded expression, one you might see a leading man make in some Hollywood version of romance when asking their object of affection out on a first date when she's been coy. Good Lord. Plans? Me? I bit my lip. My plan today was to get here, buy this. I shook the giant bottle in my hand for effect. So that's almost done, since I haven't actually purchased it yet. That was about as far as I'd gotten. So once I've checked that off the list, I guess I need to go through my parents' stuff, pack, clean, pay bills, get rid of stuff. This all sounds very interesting, doesn't it? He gave a little half smirk. So no date? Really, Brom? Really? Yeah, no, not really dating right now, so it was all I could manage to say in response. This exchange was becoming almost entirely too comical, and for a brief moment, I wondered if it was real. I secretly poked my finger into my side just to make sure. Since I felt it, it was clearly not my imagination after all. I almost laughed out loud. He must have caught the trace of that half-suppressed laugh dancing on the corners of my mouth, judging by the expression that washed over his face just then. He tried to shake that hair out of his eye again, and failed. Oh God, I sound like a D-bag, don't I? The hurt leaving his face as he smiled, a flash of perfect white teeth, dimples in his cheeks. Well, I didn't want to infringe is all if you have plans. How long are you in town for? The funeral is next Sunday, right? I think I read that somewhere, or Luce told me, I don't know. Anywho, you're probably pretty busy with all the details, but hey, after the service, why don't I come by and help you out with all that packing up and cleaning up for a little bit? I bet it's mighty difficult to tackle all that with your arm and that thing. And well, I ain't got no solid plans myself, so what do you say? I can bring another bottle of that and something to mix it with if you like. He nodded towards my bottle. I swear, if he'd been wearing a cowboy hat, he would have tipped it at me. I stood there silently considering this for several moments. Did I really want to be alone in my parents' house with him? After what had happened with Adam, I was a little weary. Even more so since this was Lucy's brother. But he'd made a good point, and I'd already done so much with Mel's help. I didn't have a good reason to refuse him. Not one I could say out loud, anyway. I like ginger beer, not the watered-down corn syrup crap that passes for ginger ale, the real stuff. Is there anywhere to get that around here? Damn it, well, there it was. I liked stirring up trouble, apparently. Something about him put me at ease, which was strange enough. Even stranger after the events of the past few days. I tried not to think about any of it now. His smile beamed. Why, I know exactly where to grab some of that. Happens to be my go-to. I'll also bring some fresh lemonade. You gotta try it together. So I take it, that's a yes? He was still smiling at me, his soft pink lips stretched over those perfect teeth again, his eyes shining bright. Yes, it's not a date though. Agreed? Right, not a date. He winked. It's not. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. There was a little hesitation in my voice, a little grimace forming on my face. Not that I'm being assumptive. Of course not, though you could be. He smiled right into my face, took a little inhale of air, then gave me a sincere look, touching my shoulder again as he leaned down to look me in the eyes. Trust me, Miss Andi, I have no evil intent in my offer of spending time alone with you, ma'am. Yeah, he needed the cowboy hat. He had that southern boy charm in spades, which actually worked with his whole rocker image somehow. He rolled up the sleeves of his white button-down. I stared in awe as the artwork was presented. He had a lot of ink. It was all very intricate. I recognized the artist of one of the pieces. Holy shit, is that a Hume? How the hell did you get an appointment? I was in awe. Hume is one of those tattoo artists that requires a down payment and a 2-year reservation. Oh, a close personal friend. The smile beamed again. If you ever have any interest, I could get you a slot. You only have that one still? A realization hit me. He was referring to a tattoo, my very first one that I'd gotten when a group of us had gone into the city for the day to go to a concert when I was younger, before I moved away. It's a bat with wings outstretched, spanning across my shoulder blades. I hadn't remembered that outing until just now. I guess no one really ever asked me about it. I just knew it was the first one I'd gotten when I went to get the other pieces on my back. No, not by a long shot, but a fucking Hume? Come on, Bram, no way. Well then, Missy, you should come visit me in New York. I'll set up a meeting. We'll get you a nice little daisy. He pointed at my hip bone. Right there. Then you can be a bona fide girly girl. He was smiling still. Oh, that's so thoughtful, I mocked. We both knew I'd never get a tattoo like that. He stiffened slightly and tried to appear more serious. It wasn't really working, but the effort was at least made. Well, now that you have agreed to my offer, my lady, when shall this event occur? Up to you, ma'am. I am your servant. A sunbeam reached through the window at that moment and landed right across his eyes, and for the briefest of seconds there was almost a familiar brightness in the blue, something I recognized. But as the light faded, I realized it wasn't his eyes I'd remembered. I had to steady myself. The memory was so brief but impactful. I forgot he was waiting for me to respond, and I was staring into space. Well, don't leave a fella hanging. He gently touched my arm. It was enough to bring me back to reality. Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe after the service, if you want to. Fair warning, though, it's probably going to be a shit show. I wasn't being sarcastic. I was truly envisioning a complete mess. Sounds perfect. I was planning on showing my respects, and I love a shit show. I could escort you back to the house afterwards if you like. Not being assumptive, just being helpful, ma'am. I rolled an idea around for a second and spoke before I could reconsider it. Actually, if it wouldn't be too much to ask, would you mind giving me a lift to the service? I don't really drive. I realized as I said it that I had driven here and he might wonder about it. I quickly added, I do, I have a license and everything, but I also don't make friends when I do so. I didn't want to admit how long it had taken me to drive here, and I didn't want him to offer me a ride now. Well, sure thing, miss, at your service. He grinned, then asked for my phone number, wholly as a practical matter of communication. I gave it to him as he saved the information in his phone. We paid for our items, and he turned towards me before exiting. He smiled again, gave me another small hug, and said he'd text me just to confirm, and so that I would have his number. I thanked him and watched him walk outside. I didn't want to run into him in the parking lot, so I stalled in the store for another 10 minutes before relenting to the task of driving back. The drive back was somehow not as horrible as the drive there had been. I even managed to get up to a very speedy 35 miles per hour. Partway through the drive, my stomach sank. I remembered the folder and thought of Adam, all intermingled with echoes of what those terrible children had said. I had this nagging feeling that there was some truth in some of what they'd said, but my mind wouldn't allow me to go back to it, which made the entire thing worse. My anxiety was creeping back up my spine at a rapid pace. I needed to get out of this car, but the only place to go was that house. Vlad's words came back to me as I pulled into the driveway. You are safe in this house. He'd said it, and he'd meant it. I had to believe that. My uneasy legs managed to park the car safely in the garage. I opened the door, sat the vodka down, and walked into the kitchen to grab a glass. Instead, I discovered a pill on the counter, a clean glass next to it, and a single white rose. I recognized the pill as a Xanax instantly. I didn't know what to do other than stand there in the kitchen, the tears welling in my eyes for a reason I couldn't understand, shaking like a leaf. My whole body was trembling. I wanted to thank him. But there was the little problem that I still didn't quite believe he was real, even though what I was looking at directly in front of me had no explanation that wasn't impossible, or at least improbable. Your pills are missing, yes? He doesn't want you to overdose. That is what Vlad had said. I considered that and tried to make it make sense. I looked around me, my eyes desperate for some trace or clue to settle my mind. For a few moments, I considered calling Vlad, but I second-guessed it and decided against it. What could he really have told me? He'd said that he told me everything he could. I glanced back down to the counter and noticed a small white card next to the glass. Flowing, steady ink. Penmanship so fluid and calligraphic. Welcome back. Upon seeing that card, part of my mind snapped back. I remembered that penmanship from some part of my past. I caught a brief flash of a letter in that same hand, covered in wet drops, sending streams of ink down the paper, but it was gone before I could fully recall anything else about it. A stabbing pain lanced through my skull, and I had to grab the counter for balance. Everything was strobing. I had to shut my eyes in order not to fall over. I took slow movements to open one eye enough to get to the sink with the glass and run some water. I needed to get part of this pill down. The last half of the ride here had left me unsettled enough. Coming home to the unexpected gifts on the counter must have really done me in. The kitchen was spinning. I managed to swallow the pill and get back to the counter and flop myself onto a bar stool where I'd left the folder sitting all day. It was the last thing I wanted to see, so I pushed it to the side, away from my direct line of sight. I sat for a few more minutes at the bar, pressing the cold glass of water against my cheeks, waiting for the pill to take effect. What was I going to do about this? I couldn't just dismiss it away, but I was not in the habit of believing in things I couldn't see. I picked up the card again and flipped it over in my hand, one eye still tightly closed. I wanted to believe. I wanted to manifest whatever he was into existence just to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. I wanted to believe Vladimir. I wanted to see this being and embrace the fairy tale of it all. I just couldn't. I flicked the card back onto the bar and took another sip of water. The skeleton key bounced against my skin, reminding me of its presence around my neck. A casual hand reached around it, pressing it into the skin of my palm. I want to believe, I really do. I sighed and stretched, allowing the key to drop against me. I felt a little of the edginess soften and realized my head was pounding significantly less than before. The thoughts still pried their way into the small crevices of my thoughts that the pills hadn't closed off. Upon this realization, I made my way back to the small table where I had left the vodka. Thank you, friend, if that was you, for the Xanax. I don't suppose you'd like to return the rest to me? No? I waited for a minute. Moving back into the kitchen to pour a glass of the vodka I'd fought so hard to obtain, practically daring something to grab the bottle from my hand, but nothing happened. I chuckled as I poured a good-sized shot. I looked at it in the glass for a moment, still wondering if I was going to be allowed to ingest this, then got the brilliant idea to disguise it with some orange juice. I don't know why this made any kind of sense to me, but I went with it all the same. Still, nothing happened. I sipped and looked around, listening for the most microscopic of noises. After about 5 minutes of silence, I laughed out loud and pounded the rest of the drink down my throat. My stomach then reminded me of its existence. I hadn't really been eating, though I suppose even under normal circumstances that would be acceptable behavior during grief. But I wasn't grieving. I hadn't really considered this until now. I was so disconnected from my parents that their passing seemed like an abstract thing that was happening to someone else. Maybe in another lifetime there was a daughter who was deeply devastated by the loss of her parents, and in such a horrific way. But me? It dawned on me that this was all a horrendous inconvenience more than anything else. But perhaps I was suffering from some form of grief. I was grieving for that poor creature in those photos, who I knew to be me, but could not remember at all. 20 years is a long time ago, but for something so traumatic, how could I have forgotten? I was grieving for the terrible events that had occurred since I'd stepped foot back through that garish red door. I was grieving for the loss of my childhood, and possibly grieving at the time that had been robbed from me at my inability to remember it. I was feeling an intense loss for something else too, something I couldn't quite place my finger on, something lurking in every shadow and dancing on the edges of every moment. Though it should be obvious to me by now that it's not a something at all, and more of a someone. I sank onto the sofa, forgetting altogether about the bloodstains and the events that had placed them there, forgetting further about any of the things I needed to get done, forgetting for a few more agonizing moments about the emptiness in my stomach, not wanting to deal with the effort it would take to make myself something to eat. After a few moments of my stomach threatening to burst through my body, I got up and went back into the kitchen. Finding the effort to make actual food too much to endure, I settled on oatmeal. It was quick, easy, and got the job done. I sat flipping through my phone, half aware of oatmeal being eaten by a mouth that I didn't seem to remember being my own. It was 8 p.m. somehow. I didn't know how that was possible, but the clock doesn't lie. Not a single strange thing had happened since I'd gotten back here. I wondered then if I'd imagined the entire thing. The pills in my system were dulling the edges again, but I had temporarily forgotten that. My phone vibrated in my hand just then, a text message from a number I didn't recognize. For a second, my skin crawled, thinking it might be Adam, but then seeing the text message, I realized it was Brahm. "Andi, 'tis I, your servant. Save my number and have a good night. Text if you need anything." I added him to my contacts and sat the phone back down, plugging it into the charger. At least some things had stopped being so hard to do. After I finished eating, I washed out my bowl, poured another glass of vodka with OJ. OJ pairs with oatmeal, don't judge me. And headed down into the den. I hadn't spent more than 5 minutes in this room yet, but it is where the TV is, and all I wanted to do was watch something mindless and forget I was here. The streaming services hadn't been canceled, so I had every option at my fingertips. I scrolled through about a dozen offerings before settling on some reality show where the contestants have to taste dishes and try to guess if their spouse or a stranger prepared it. It was just the right thing for me to doze off to. And that concludes this section of the story. This is Mr. Pickles. Mr. Pickles, so I don't know if any of you have one of these special little things that you acquired at some point in your life and you have no real memory of exactly where you acquired it or what point you acquired it at, but just as far back as you can remember, this thing has been in your life, and that's Mr. Pickles. He just appeared in my life one day and has kind of been with me since as long as I can remember. And I don't know, it's weird, right? It's weird that we get like these attachments to these little inanimate objects and they take on a personality, and he very much has a personality. I don't know. Tell me if any of you have a little friend, inanimate object thing that has gone with you through your life. That kind of thing just really fascinates me. Humans are very strange creatures. We put these attachments on things that can't really talk or say anything, but he does talk. He does talk, and he does communicate with me, and I don't know. Am I crazy? I don't know. But anyway, so this is my little spider monkey, Mr. Pickles. Maybe next week I will have a different guest here. We'll see. I might change the mantle up next week as well. I know I'm saying this now, and I've said this a few times before, but next week I really think I'm going to present a new story. Slightly different mood, not quite as heavy, more fairy tale than whatever is happening here. But let me know what you think. You can drop a comment here, so that could be fun. You know, pop in, say hi. Thank you so much again for following, for listening, for all of your energy and tune back in, because we wouldn't be doing this if you weren't here. So, and just thank all of you so much. Thank you so much for coming in and listening to me read you one of my stories. Yeah. So have a wonderful night. Thank you all again. And I will see you next time.
Bye. Bye-bye.